Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so we've been reading the Ānāpānasati Sutta. This is Sutta number 118 in the middle-length Discourses. And this is the Sutta on mindfulness of breathing. Okay, and so far in the sequence on mindfulness of breathing, we've covered what I call the basic step, or the foundation, which is in paragraph 17. That is, having sat down, crossed the legs, set the body erect, and set up mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful, he breathes in, mindful, he breathes out. So that is really, you could say, the foundation or basis for the whole practice of mindfulness of breathing. I just wanted to say something. I don't think I spoke last week about this expression, established mindfulness in front of him, which in Pali, it's parimukkhang satting upatapetva. And the key word here is parimukkhang. So the word mukkhang by itself can mean the face or the mouth, more specifically the mouth. And the prefix pari gives the sense of around. So when you take parimukkhang together, literally it would have the sense of around the face or around the mouth. And so this becomes the basis in the commentaries for the statement that when you set up or practice mindfulness of breathing, you set up the mindfulness around the nostrils or on the upper lip, just above the mouth. Years ago, I had investigated this expression, and I found that it seems to be used in a sense that seems to be used sometimes in such a way that it should not be taken too literally. So it could be taken simply as setting up mindfulness without indicating a specific place. But because if it's taken literally, it indicates around the mouth, therefore the commentators say that when you practice mindfulness and breathing, the attention should be fixed around the nostrils, the upper lip, wherever one feels the impact of the breath coming in or going out. But I know teachers who teach mindfulness of breathing without focusing the breath, but without focusing mindfulness on the breath in that specific place. Even I remember hearing a recording of Ajahn Brahmavangso, who's a great advocate of mindfulness and breathing, and he said to follow the breath wherever one could feel most distinctly and clearly the motion of the body that's connected with breathing in and breathing out. And so though I used to take the expression quite literally, now I take a sort of broader interpretation. I don't know about Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, Does he ever specify a particular place to observe the breath? No, he just says, be aware of the breath. Does he give choices of here? He doesn't mention any place, just be aware of the breathing. So my advice to people who are practicing, of course, if you're practicing under a teacher who says, focus on the breath in this area, then you should follow their instructions. But if you're practicing on your own, you can experiment and see where you feel this impression of the breath coming in and out most distinctly. As I think I mentioned last week, there are times when I have this heaviness in the head and I don't want to focus on the breathing there. So where I observe the impact of the breath is on the buttocks, where when you breathe in, there's an increase in the pressure because sort of there's an expansion of the body, and so the buttocks are pressing more forcefully upon the cushion. Then when one breathes out, there's a sort of light lifting of that pressure. And so one could be following the breath in quite minute detail just through the pressure sensation on the buttock. Now, if this gets on YouTube, there's going to be a revolution. A whole generation is going to grow up practicing mindfulness and breathing on the buttocks. Okay, so we have the basic practice of mindfulness of breathing indicated by that one phrase. Ever mindful, one breathes in. Mindful, one breathes out. Then comes a set of 4 phases in which one observes whether the breath is long, whether it's short. Then comes the controversial phrase, experiencing the whole body, sabakaya patisangvedi, which I explained last week. There are 2 interpretations of that, either as literally getting the sense of the whole body as one is breathing in, breathing out, or sort of the more established interpretation of the commentaries. It means that as you breathe in, you become aware of the entire in-breath from its inception through the drawing in of the breath to the very end of the in-breath. And as you breathe out, you become aware of the entire out-breath from its beginning through the whole extent of the out-breath to the end, but always keeping the attention in the place where the post of observation, not following the breath from the nostrils down the windpipe into the lungs, down to the bottom of the lungs, and then from the bottom of the lungs up and out. Okay, and then lastly comes breathing in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. And then, as we explained last time, the bodily formation is explained in some sutras to be the process of in and out breathing. So this, in effect, means breathing in and out, tranquilizing the body. Tranquilizing the breath. But on a wider interpretation, one might take the bodily formation to be the sense of everything connected with the breath going on in the body. But as the breath becomes more tranquil, all the other kind of micro-activities, molecular activities associated with the breath, the nervous activities, muscular activities, even molecular activities will become more tranquil. Okay, so now we come to the new section. So here we have the text says, he trains thus, I shall breathe in, experiencing rapture. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, experiencing rapture. Then let's take the next pair. He trains thus, I shall breathe in, experiencing pleasure. He he trains thus, I shall breathe out experiencing pleasure. Now the two key words in these two steps of mindfulness of breathing are piti pati samvedi and sukha pati samvedi. And now, if you're familiar with the formula for the first jhana, you know that what's emphasized in the formula for the first jhana is precisely these two qualities of piti and sukha. For example, if you look at the formula for the first jhana, let's see. For example, on page 275, paragraph 19, it speaks about how the meditator abandons the five hindrances and enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. So what is being indicated in these two steps or phases of mindfulness of breathing is the arising of these two sort of powerful emotive or felt qualities, which will eventually, when developed to a certain sufficient degree of strength, will become the dominant factors in the first jhana. Is the recording okay?
The recording is okay. It's a low hum noise.
Coming from the device?
Not sure, maybe the frequency.
Okay, now there's a difference between piti or rapture and sukha, in that piti, in terms of a technical classification, piti or rapture is assigned, of the scheme of the five aggregates. Piti or rapture is assigned to the aggregate of mental formations or volitional formations. So it's not actually a feeling, though it seems to be very closely associated with feelings, particularly with sukha. And so the word piti, it has various nuances, different translations, sometimes joy, elation, upliftment, exhilaration. Even in its stronger degree, we might render it as ecstasy. I can use that word without seeing flashing colors and and piti, rapture, is a somewhat coarser quality than sukha. Sukha, or pleasure, belongs to the five aggregate. It belongs to the aggregate of feelings. So pleasure is one of the feelings of the three types: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling. So sukha is the pleasant feeling. And whenever rapture arises, it's always accompanied by pleasant feeling. And so it's a bit difficult to distinguish the two. In order to distinguish the two, one has to be able to inspect the state of mind and see what is piti, what is this rapture, this uplifting, exhilarating quality, and what is the pleasure. Hard to define pleasure, but it's simply a pleasant feeling. And the distinction becomes, it's rather obscure in the early stages, because when piti arises, it's like, let's say, two girls come to a ball or a dance, and one is wearing a bright pink and red dress, like the color of this, is that like a pocketbook? Pocketbook in front of me. So one girl is coming in a pink, white, red dress, with frills and ruffles, fluffles. And the other girl who's alongside her is wearing a sort of a light gray dress. So when the two girls come into see who's come in, and of course the attention is going to focus on the girl in the bright pink and red dress, right? Even though the girl in the gray dress might be prettier, but it just seems to be the natural circuitry of the male nervous system to be attracted to something which is bright and flashy rather than something which is dull and subdued. So when this piti comes up, even though it's accompanied by sukha, but one doesn't notice the sukha so clearly because the mind is getting sort of overwhelmed by the impression of this joy, delight, elation. But as the dance goes on, or as one gets accustomed to the sight of the two girls who have come into the dance hall and starts looking at them, one could see that maybe the girl in the subdued gray dress is prettier than the girl in the bright pink and red dress. You're thinking, that's a bad monk. What kind of examples does he think of? Okay, so in a similar way, once one sort of gets accustomed to these two qualities present in the mind, then one starts to see that sukha is actually more pleasant, it's subtler, more refined, and more, naturally, it's more pleasure, it's more pleasant than joy or rapture. And so with continued practice, one can distinguish the difference between piti, rapture, and sukha, pleasure. And in fact, as the practice continues, even though you see in the earlier stages, disturbances, the obstacles, the hindrances start to subside, then they come up together. The experience of rapture and pleasure. But as one continues with the practice, then the rapture becomes more refined, it sort of settles down. And so then the pleasure becomes more prominent, and then one can distinguish the pleasure. Now, what seems to me to be interesting, the way the practice is formulated in the sutta, we have to remember that this is still mindfulness of breathing, and so the attention, at least in my understanding, should still be focused upon the in and out breath. It doesn't say that one becomes aware or focuses on rapture, or focuses on pleasure, but it says, what? I shall breathe in experiencing rapture. I shall breathe out experiencing rapture. I shall breathe in experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe out experiencing pleasure. And so it continues to, I think the focus point of the training is to continue to be mindful of the breath. That is the sense that he trains thus. One is continuing to be mindful of the breath. But as the piti arises, then one knows one is experiencing piti, or rapture. As the pleasure arises, one knows one is experiencing the pleasure. But one still keeps the focus on the breath. Okay, the next step is I shall breathe in experiencing the mental formation. Let's take the next two steps together. I shall breathe in experiencing the mental formation. I shall breathe out experiencing the mental formation. And then I shall breathe in tranquilizing the mental formation. I shall breathe out tranquilizing the mental formation. Now here we have the expression mental formation, which in Pali is citta sankhara. Now usually, in other contexts, citta sankhara refers to volitional activities of the mind which are creating karma, particularly in the formula of dependent origination. But here, it has a different sense, which again is indicated by Sutta number 44. This is page 399, where it says that perception and feeling are the mental formation. And the reason given, this is in section 15, and then the reason why perception and feeling are the mental formation is that perception and feeling are mental. They are states bound up with the mind. So since here we've been concerned with rapture and pleasure, so we could say that the mental formation, since it's feeling and perception, here probably the emphasis is on feeling. It's a little bit of a puzzle. If pleasure is a feeling, then what's the difference between experiencing pleasure and experiencing the mental formation? And I don't have a definite answer to this, but just a sort of speculation or conjecture, maybe two ways to interpret this. One is to take it that in the second step, one is focusing upon the experience of pleasure as pleasure, whereas in the third step, though one is experiencing pleasure, or it could be pain or whatever feeling arises, one is seeing that feeling just as a feeling. One is not sort of getting carried away by the particular tone of that experience, whether it be pleasant, painful, or neutral. The second interpretation is that here we could say that mental formation has a wider meaning, even though in that sutta it's perception and feeling. But here we might say that it could be like the whole bundle of mental factors that are being experienced in the meditative process. So that is really difficult to be experiencing like a whole bundle of mental factors at the same time. I'm inclined to go with taking it in this narrowest sense of feeling, but now one is just recognizing it as a feeling as one breathes in and breathes out. And then as one goes on mindfully breathing in and out, then the mental formation is becoming more tranquil, more refined. Because the body is becoming more tranquil, more refined. In the previous passage we had, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. Here we have, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the mental formation. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the mental formation. So here, this is a kind of consequence of the mindful attention to in and out breathing, both the activities of the body, whatever kind of neurological and muscular processes there are, become subtler, more tranquil, and also the mental activities become subtler and more tranquil. And so even though it says one trains thus tranquilizing, one's trains thus tranquilizing, but the way it's understood, one doesn't make a deliberate effort to tranquilize the mental formation, but the deliberate effort, the training, is to be mindful of the breath. But as one is mindful of the breath, as the breath becomes subtler, quieter, more tranquil, then the mental activities will also become subtler and more tranquil. Okay, shall we go on to let's go on to the next section.
And you lower your head, you touch the microphone, the audio is not that.
Maybe I put on the robe rather. How is this? Is this better? How is this?
Can you lower your head and
Okay. This is okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we come to the third tetrad in mindfulness of breathing. So this says, I shall breathe in, experiencing the mind. This is, the word mind here is citta. I shall breathe out, experiencing the mind. I shall breathe in, gladdening the mind. Then he trains thus, I shall breathe out, gladdening the mind. So it seems that in this phase, the sort of focus point is on experiencing the state of mind as one is breathing in and out. Perhaps one could take this as an awareness of the thoughts that are occurring in the mind. But it seems that, again, the focus shouldn't be on discerning and distinguishing the individual thoughts the way one would do so if one is deliberately practicing cittanupassana, contemplation of mind as a primary meditation object. But just if any particular states of mind become prominent, one just becomes aware of them, then lets them go and brings the mind back to the in and out breathing. So this is training in, breathing out, experiencing the mind. But then a more significant stage comes with the next phrase, which is gladdening the mind. I'm not so sure that I like the word gladdening, because the Pali has a richer meaning than the English word glad. You know, I'm glad to see you. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. But this is a more really joyful, exhilarating experience. Chit abhipamodayang, I think is the Pali. Yeah, the word is abhipamodayang, which, what grammatical form is it? Okay, it's a present participle, nominative singular. Okay, that's not important. But it's based upon the root mood, which has the sense of joy, to experience joy. And so from this root mood, we get, in the Brahmaviharas, we get mudita, which is sometimes translated sympathetic joy, altruistic joy, appreciative joy. And then we get two related nouns, pamoja and pamudita, which both have the sense of joy. And so these are closely connected with piti, with rapture. So this expression seems to be a parallel to the experience of rapture in the previous tetrad. So this is, let's say, when one is experiencing the mind, the first stage, then one is becoming aware of any particular mind states that arise, one is letting them go, and bringing the mind back to the breath, being aware of breathing in, breathing out. Then as the mind becomes more focused upon the breath, then this joy arises. And then at a certain point, one could almost like deliberately suffuse the mind with that sense of joy. And so this would be, the way I understand, breathing in, let's get rid of gladdening, rejoicing the mind. Does that make sense? I shall breathe out, rejoicing the mind. So suffusing the mind with joy, with bliss. Okay, but now there seems to be a progression taking place in the next step, which is, he trains thus, I shall breathe in, concentrating the mind. I shall breathe out, concentrating the mind. So here, the focus is not getting, even though in the second stage one is suffusing the mind with the joy, but now, since once the mind has become uplifted with joy, one doesn't want to let the mind become attached and carried away by the exhilarating experience of joy. And so one even lets the joy go and just concentrates the mind more and more, I say gently, but continuously on the breath. So concentrating the mind doesn't mean that one forcefully pushes the mind onto the breath, but one just breathes in, breathes out mindfully, and lets the mind sort of rest continuously, uninterruptedly on the breath, coming in and going out. And the word here, which is translated concentrating, samadhahang, is also, it's a present participle which is related to the noun samadhi. So the implication here, when you read through the original Pali text into the relationship between the verbal expressions and the nouns that they are connected to, you see that the emphasis is upon the deepening of the samadhi experience through mindfulness of breathing. And so probably we could see here a movement into the jhana being suggested. Even though the relationship of these stages to jhana, it's not made explicit within the Ānāpānasati Sutta. Nothing is said, at this point the meditator achieves the first jhana, at this point the second jhana. But it seems that just from the use of the words, that the implication is that one is going at least into access concentration, if not yet going into full concentration, into full jhana. Okay, then the next expression, or next step in the process, he trains thus, I shall breathe in, liberating the mind. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. And here, if one just reads this on its face value, one can misinterpret the statement. Okay, the expression used. Okay, the word that's used to describe the process, vimochayang, that's the word which is rendered as liberating the mind. And from this we get two possible nouns, either vimokha or vimutti, which both can be translated as liberation. Okay, now if you're reading this sort of and interpreting just on the surface, just on the apparent meaning, it seems to be saying that at this point one is attaining, the ultimate liberation of the mind. But I don't think that's the actual intention here, because this is a 16-step process of training, and one is still, if one could see, sort of reading into what's being described here, it's a process of deepening concentration. The text hasn't yet brought in any insight practice. And so what seems to be intended, and this is the way the commentary will explain it, is that one is liberating or releasing the mind, dropping, letting go of successively coarser factors as one progresses into deeper samadhi, deeper concentration. So initially, one liberates the mind by letting go of giving up the 5 mental hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness, doubt. Then, as one enters into the first jhana, and one wants to move to the second jhana, then one has to give up, release the mind from the coarser jhana factors, thought and examination, vitakka and vichara. Then as one progresses to the third jhana, then one has to liberate the mind even from rapture and go enter a state of pure, blissful pleasure. And then to go from the third jhana to the fourth jhana, one has to liberate the mind even from that pleasant feeling and go towards the feeling which is neither pleasant nor painful, the neutral or equanimous feeling. So this seems to be not the permanent, irreversible liberation of the destruction of the defilements but this is a temporary liberation into samadhi through deepened concentration and the giving up of successfully coarser factors of the mind, the factors which are constricting the mind. Okay, at this point I'll ask whether there's any questions on anything that's been covered so far. And just first, just as a sort of overall statement to sum up the first three sectors of mindfulness of breathing. This will be actually starting from paragraph 17 through paragraph or section 20. It seems to me that these sections are all concerned with the deepening of samadhi, or with the practice of what is called samatha, that is tranquility meditation, serenity meditation, not yet with the practice of insight or vipassana.
My question.
That was your question.
Well, it brought up insight in the comments, and it states that rapture in the mode of insight. I'm thinking you don't have to go in actually practicing vipassana, in other words, you're saying.
I'm not sure that this one is working.
Hello? Yeah, it's not working. I could talk loud if you like to. Yeah.
But now I think she increased the volume. Okay. Go on.
Yeah. Okay. When it brings up the number 118 on the under the notes, it states that rapture is in the mode of insight, but you're saying that it's not vipassana. So which insight they are?
Well, I mean, this is a good point. You see, the commentary is trying to explain all of the sections in terms of both serenity and insight. And so it's explaining how each of these